Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. So today, two very important gubernatorial races are playing out in Virginia and New Jersey. They're both important bellwethers, perhaps, for where the country may be headed. But looking at Virginia specifically, because there are a lot of issues involved in this race, namely CRT and, of course, student privacy and mask and vaccine mandates. You have the race between Democrat Terry McAuliffe and Republican Glenn Youngkin. And while it's a race for governor, everybody knows that there's a lot more about this contest than just the gubernatorial race. It's a real-world temperature check on how the Biden administration is faring with the American people. Virginia is a state that went Democrat by +10 in the last presidential elections, and it was solidly, really, pretty kind of blue. For the most part, it was a little purpley during the Donald Trump era. And that makes the Virginia gubernatorial race that much more interesting and important. I mean, consider this. A year ago, not even a year ago, it was +10. You had a couple of other races that went Republican, and now you have Terry McAuliffe, who is literally within the margin of error, neck and neck with Glenn Youngkin, which is unheard of for a Beltway barnacle like McAuliffe. So important is this race that Democrats have rolled out the big guns like Barack Obama, who apparently is still the true leader of the Democrat Party. He's the only one out there fundraising and stumping. They brought him into the state for Terry McAuliffe. And even despite that, Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin in this state is slightly ahead in all of the polls. It's too close to call because they're within the margin of error. There's one poll that shows Youngkin is up by +2, but still within the margin of error. It's just neck and neck. McAuliffe should be running away with this race. Now, I will say there were some numbers that came in that show some early voting. Now, last year at this time, the early voting was +30 in favor of Democrats, but now it's like +13, I think, so far with everything that's been counted in favor of Democrats, which is hugely significant, and it also means that Virginia can absolutely go red, depending on whether or not Republicans want to put in the effort to make it happen, which I think they do. So, Terry McAuliffe, some of it's Terry McAuliffe, some of it's the Biden administration, and some of its parents are just mad about mandates. The Biden administration is tanking in the polls due to mandates and everything else and all the consequences of their policies. Even Democrats don't like where the country is heading. Biden was supposed to be President McUnity. He was sold as the anti-Trump antidote that America needed. Instead, Biden has chosen to rub salt in the wounds of the nation, exacerbating the present division in order to advance his unpopular agenda. So, by injecting race into everything, that's how Biden's doing it. Think about January 6th. It wasn't a riot, it was a white nationalist insurgency, and it was like one of the greatest threats to the world, the Biden administration told us. Parents speaking up at board meetings wasn't parents exercising their rights, it was white supremacy on display, and parents should be regarded as possible domestic terrorists, according to our own DOJ, who intimated such in a response to a National School Board Association letter. Homeland Security tells us every day that the #1 threat to America is indeed white supremacy when it's not climate change, apparently, and everyone should be on high alert. All these white supremacists are inside our military even, said the administration, and our border patrol is just not doing their job securing the border. That's what they're saying. I mean, it's not border patrol. They're white supremacists on horses, whipping black Haitians. That's what the Biden administration promotes. That's honestly what they were reacting to. You remember that story with the photo, right? Always the same lie. Everyone in the Democrats' way is a racist, and because the Republic and the Constitution that it's built on is in the way of their plans, the Biden administration is fine with calling all of America and its foundings racist too. So the point being, the administration has made the weaponization of race the cornerstone of its platform. And if someone opposes the administration's idea or policies in any way, like for instance, Senator Joe Manchin opposing the reconciliation bill, Democrats will pull out the race card and say that that individual does not care about communities of color, which is exactly what Democrat Cori Bush of St. Louis is doing to Democrat Joe Manchin. About the reconciliation bill. Point is, racialization and division, this is what the administration is selling and using as a get out the vote mechanism. The question is, are voters buying it? So this is one reason why the Virginia race for governor is incredibly interesting. This is where we find out, and remember, this is also led by parents because you have people reacting to all the mandates and everything else. So people are going to find out exactly what the impact of this is. And it's going to be setting some narratives. So McAuliffe seems to be, all he seems to be running on is accusing everyone else, going along with the Biden administration, accusing everyone else of being racist and saying that parents have no sovereignty over their kids, right? He said there's no critical race theory in schools, except there is. Here's Terry McAuliffe denying that CRT is at all whatsoever taught in public schools. And if you suggest that it is, you're a racist somehow. Watch.
I am sick of them talking about these issues of critical race theory. We do not teach critical race theory here in Virginia. It has never been taught. It is a racist dog whistle. It is pitting parents against parents, parents against teachers, and they're using our children as political pawns, and it has got to stop.
Now, Christopher Rufo and many others, including Asra Nomani, did some digging, and of course, lo and behold, here's then Governor Terry McAuliffe's Department of Education instructing Virginia public schools to, quote, embrace critical race theory, end quote, in order to re-engineer attitudes and belief systems. This was in 2015. Now, this is an explicit endorsement of CRT. McAuliffe cannot say that this is not an explicit endorsement of CRT. And also, under Democrat Ralph Northam, the one who went as blackfaced so often that his nickname was a slur, then superintendent of, under Governor Ralph Northam, then superintendent of public instruction, James Lane, remember this story? We talked about this on my radio program, sent a memo to Virginia public schools endorsing the quote-unquote foundations of critical race theory in education. Said that it was an important analytic tool somehow that could, quote, further spur developments in education. So they're not just teaching CRT, they're way down the road of implementing it in Virginia schools. And McAuliffe knows that because he instituted the very policies in Virginia schools when he was governor the first time. So Democrats, they're just lying about this now and trying to change the subject. And they get away with blackface and implementing CRT while they call you the racist if you dare disagree with their policies, like they're doing with parents in Loudoun County and, of course, gubernatorial Republican candidate Glenn Youngkin. You just play the race card. That's the whole strategy. And when McAuliffe isn't busy telling parents that they ought to stay out of the way of teachers who want to indoctrinate their kids with CRT and gender fluidity, well, then he's busy calling Youngkin a racist. So, in fact, playing the race card is all McAuliffe has done going into this final stretch. And to mischaracterize horribly his opponent as a racist, Democrats, did you see what they did? They sent these tiki torch wielding actual members of Young Democrats of Virginia. These people were shutting down their social media accounts. They in the rain, they sent them, this was in Charlottesville, to a Youngkin rally. And they had them stand in front of their tour bus to make it look like Glenn Youngkin was appealing to white supremacists. And so the internet actually is very good at certain things, and one of them was researching who these people were. Every single one of them were all Democrat operatives, every single one. And one big takeaway is that one of them were black, a black white supremacist. And this is like Dave Chappelle's skit. So, of course, behind this childish stunt for the McAuliffe campaign was the Lincoln Project, a group of people who think themselves Machiavellian operatives, including the one founder, John Weaver, who, according to the New York Times, is accused of soliciting sex by over 21 different young men, some of them minors. Apparently, one of them, according to one report, was 15, that they were being propositioned. This is insane. So this group, apparently, they were the so-called operatives that were behind this. They were ridiculed all over the internet, which they should be. But of course, these are people who are all designed, just like McAuliffe and all the other Democrats, to target good candidates like Glenn Youngkin. So here's another one. I'm pretty sure that this is entirely an op, because here you have, now just show the photo. Now see, no one else in this photo has hats like these two people. You have two people, this is Virginia for the love, that show up in cowboy hats. One of them has a Confederate patch on his jacket, and they walked right in front of the press area. That they made a beeline for the press area and stood in front of the press area the entire time. There were no fewer than 5 different reporters that were taking pictures of the backs of these people. And interestingly, after the whole thing with the Youngkin bus and those people with the tiki torches, no one took a photo of the front of these people. Now, I just want to remind you all for 1 minute, just what was it, the other day, a pilot had said on Southwest, let's go Brandon, and you had a reporter on that flight that was going to break into the cockpit to ask that pilot a question about him saying, let's go Brandon, and you're telling me that 5 reporters couldn't tap any one of these two people on the shoulder and ask them what the deal was and get a name? Isn't it interesting how like that curiosity with the situational journalisming comes into play? So again, the race card is the only card that the administration and Democrats have because their unpopular policies, they're not helping this country. That's why the polls reflect the sentiment. And if they can distract everybody with charges of racism, they're more than happy to do this. This is their playbook. Standard operating procedure. They don't care how much damage it causes. Remember, Kamala Harris was willing to call Joe Biden a racist in the presidential debate. She was actually not afraid to be right at one point before she decided to be wrong so she could be VP. She thought it would help herself become president, or at least vice president. And now she works for the racist that was apparently a zealous supporter of busing and also had given the remarks at the funeral of, I don't know, one of the Ku Klux Klan's great narwhals or whatever, exalted narwhals, whatever fictional troll character. And Biden was a racist because, remember when he said, like a modern day plantation owner who tells black people what to do and how to think, that if they didn't vote for him, they weren't black. I mean, that's craziness. Proof that Democrats are happy to use race to manipulate any voter, particularly minorities. All of this divisive rhetoric, though, teaching kids institutionalized Marxist racism in Virginia, or calling everyone a racist that thinks maybe it's not good to segregate kids by race and filter everything through the lens of race. You know what? It's turning people off, even Democrats. And we're about to find out the polls are bad. It's enough of a turnout that Glenn Youngkin is in a close race for governor in a state where no one thought Republicans would actually be competitive in a gubernatorial race. And it scared the hell out of the Democrat Party. But just like, and that, by the way, that's why you see a number of these members of Congress, Democrat members of the House of Representatives, retiring from office as opposed to seeking re-election, because they know it'd be a battle and they don't want it. But just like the Biden administration, rather than course correct when you see your poll numbers in the dirt, you have Terry McAuliffe, who keeps doubling down on race. Now, here he is. I can't believe he thought that this was a smart thing to say, saying that the problem with Virginia's schools is that there are too many white teachers in them. For real, watch.
We've got to diversify our teacher base here in Virginia. 50% of the students in Virginia schools, K-12, 50% are students of color, and yet 80% of the teachers are white. We all know what we have to do in a school to make everybody feel comfortable in school. So let's diversify. So here's what I'm going to do. We'll be the first state in America. If you'll teach for 5 years here in Virginia in a high-demand area, that it be geographic or coursework, we will pay room, board, and tuition at any college, any university, any HBCU here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
That was Terry McAuliffe's closing argument to Virginians. Vote for me because the teachers are too white. Just fire all your white teachers there. You got the problem solved, Terry. Go ahead and put that out there on the pitch, right? Race, race, and more race. So who's actually dividing us? I mean, Trump? No, I don't think so. Glenn Youngkin? No. Or the party of racial grievance and racial strife, the party that cannot bring up a single issue on God's green earth without invoking race to turn Americans against each other. This is their entire platform at this point. Race and pronouns, right? And if you don't believe it, take a look at this spot. I am not playing it. From the Lincoln Project, that's tweeted out by Congressman Eric Swalwell. The smartest thing that he ever said was to fart on MSNBC. And also he pegged a communist spy from China, but you know, I'm not even playing it. It's just awful. So just let's scroll past this. It's just absolute garbage. It's a racial hit job. But he had tweeted about this. He accused Glenn Youngkin of wanting to apparently say a slur. Here's the tweet that he had with it, by the way. It says, quote, "There's a word that Glenn Youngkin would really like to say to talk about black people, but he knows he can't, so he codes it with critical race theory. Don't take my word. Trust the honorable Republicans." Oh my gosh, God help me. Put a hand over my mouth. "Who made this ad and know how this ugly strategy works," end quote. So, by the way, he thinks that an honorable Republican is a group that has a Confederate flag, cooler, that says the South will rise again, I guess with another civil war, I don't know. And then also propositions minor males with sexual offerings, I guess, one of the founders that was accused of doing that. Honorable? I really don't think that we want to have a guy who pegged a communist spy to be determining what is or is not honorable, right? A guy who said he was going to nuke all law-abiding gun owners because confiscation would take too long. To be clear, there is literally nothing ever that Glenn Youngkin has ever said that has ever been misconstrued in the press or elsewhere. I mean, really, nothing that the dude has said has ever been racist. His platform is all about parental rights in Virginian schools. It's it. But Democrats have decided that everything is racist. And if everything is racist, then I guess nothing is at some point. Good heavens. That's the strongest play that they have in the playbook. They can't convince people with their policies, so they'll just try to emotionally abuse you and say that you're racist if you don't support them. Now, Eric Swalwell, whose teeth look like they're covered with perpetual film, is fine with this, fine with suggesting that Glenn Youngkin would love to say racial slurs. How horrible of a person are you that you would accuse somebody so egregiously of committing such a moral failing? What a garbage human. But Swalwell says he can't say it, even though he would say it if he could. So Youngkin says critical race theory instead. I don't think Swalwell even understands what critical race theory is. It's institutionalized, actual Marxist bigotry, where everything is taught through the lens of race, and you're supposed to segregate yourself by race first, view everything through race. Everything else is secondary to your ethnicity. Good heavens. Again, this is a party, and it's an administration that has given up on trying to convince you of its policies because they know that there is no justification for the consequence of those policies and what they're doing to America. The majority of Americans do not want what the administration is selling. The polls, no matter how you slice them, are awful all around. So instead, they push racism, and they stoke some sort of like manufactured tribalism, and they try to get people to fear each other and divide everybody and appeal to the very worst of human nature. And then, of course, there's Eric Swalwell. So the governor's race in Virginia is not just about Glenn Youngkin and Terry McAuliffe. It's about what direction do we want to go as a nation. Do you want to balkanize and become just, everybody torn apart and divided by tribalism? And not just political tribalism, but everybody dividing up into just racial subgroups? That's the Biden platform. I mean, he's like reliving his segregation days. They're doing everything that they can to force this kind of split. Different national anthems, different histories, dividing people by every immutable trait imaginable. And if America buys into this racialized and tribalized plan for America, the republic is over. A house divided against itself cannot stand. As a very wise man once said. That wise man's name was Jesus. Of course, also, and one of our great presidents in the past, Abraham Lincoln, he reiterated this too. I mean, we good heavens. So all eyes are on Virginia, a blue state that is not necessarily a blue state, a purple state that has a decision to make. So whatever Virginians decide, Democrats are going to spin it to be an endorsement of their racialist policies that are ripping the public schools apart there and the nation. So we'll find out if the people have had enough. And keep your eye on the New Jersey race too, because that's a very, very interesting state for the governor's mansion in a blue state, a state that's been blue for some time. It's going to be the first time you have Democrat Phil Murphy. He's a former Goldman Sachs executive seeking a second term, and he's trying to get that second term. That hasn't happened since 1977. And you have Republican, and I'm going to probably get his name right, Jack Caratelli. But you'll never guess what card Democrat Phil Murphy's playing. Oh yeah, it's the race card. Listen to this guy. He says, quote, "Do we stand with our sacred democracy? Do we stand with Confederate flags and white supremacists in a pack of lies?" End quote. I mean, is he saying that he's not going to be a Democrat anymore? Because that was literally the Democrat Party back in those days. That literally was y'all's flag. I mean, come on. He said that, by the way, at a debate with Caratelli earlier this month, and he was referring to the Republicans' attendance at a Stop the Steal rally in late November of last year after the 2020 election. So Democrats have stopped arguing for their policies on merits. And they're not up for debating anything. They got one play. Everybody's a racist. Everybody's awful. And the only question that American voters face now is which path are they going to take, right? So here's the thing. If McAuliffe does lose, and I talked about this in my radio program, he's already hired a top-notch law firm. I'm telling you what, if Youngkin's not winning by +10, McAuliffe is going to litigate this and contest this through lawyers. So even though we may have some results tonight, it may not be official for some time. We'll see. Get out to vote, because the big thing that always happens is Republicans don't get out to vote. And it's that, and in fact, that's what we saw in the special election after 2020, especially in a state like Georgia. And I talked about this as well. And some of those most really, really red districts, Republican turnout was lower than it was, I think, historically. Unbelievable. So get out and vote. Otherwise, you forfeit any bitching about it. So up next, firefighters and other first responders are facing termination due to the left's anti-science mandates on vaccines, or rather, government injections. So we'll talk to two firefighters, including one that just lost his job because he did not want to carry out unlawful punishment for vaccine refusal. And you'll hear what they're doing to fight back against these mandates straight ahead. Black Rifle Coffee Company is not your typical coffee company. Black Rifle Coffee develops their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus they learned as military members. They've spent thousands of hours tasting and sourcing and perfecting coffee from across the world. Being founded and operated by veterans, Black Rifle Coffee knows what a quality cup of coffee means to active duty troops that are away from home for the holidays. And so Black Rifle Coffee is committed to supporting all of those who serve. With every purchase that you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. So in 2020 alone, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to soldiers overseas, to law enforcement officers, firefighters on the West Coast, and medical workers, all during the COVID-19 response. And this November, for every coffee purchase you make, a bag of their limited edition holiday roast will be sent to a service member overseas for delivery by Christmas morning. So help support the cause and visit blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV and check out the freshest coffee in America. blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV gets you 20% off of your coffee, apparel, and gear, plus 20% off your first month of the coffee club. Welcome back. So as of this week, thousands of workers in New York have been placed on unpaid leave. Thousands more are facing termination due to the vaccine mandate, which went into effect on Friday. Now, here is His Honor, Mayor Bill de Blasio, providing an update today on CNN, threatening the unvaccinated in the process. Watch this.
92% of the city workforce is now vaccinated as a result of this mandate. The vast majority of our city employees and the vast majority of our firefighters are doing the right thing. But the ones who are playing a game, they're going to have to suffer some consequences because this is unacceptable.
And notice, like in none of these discussions at all whatsoever, is the issue of natural immunity. Because a lot of these first responders have they've been around everyone, even in the early days of this pandemic when everyone else was locked down, they weren't. Remember, they were the heroes at one point, but now it's like they're the bad guys. I mean, it's a slap in the face to all the first responders across the country. Now, fortunately, there are people who are very courageously standing up to this stuff. Of course, it's the same type of courage that you have to have in order to run into a burning building. So firefighters, I was reading the headlines about how many firehouses are closing, for instance, in New York alone. Like what, a third of the firehouses are being closed? And New York is desperately begging volunteer firefighters from other states to come in and help them. Inexcusable. Joining me now are two of those firefighters, courageous firefighters, standing up to this, including one who lost his job because he did not want to get the government-mandated injection. Joining us now, retired firefighter Sam Eaton and fired, I hate saying that, Chief Stephen Davis. They're fighting back against these mandates through Operation Freedom of Choice, which is huge. Gentlemen, so good to see you. Thank you. So first off, thank you so much for what you do anyway. I mean, just your day-to-day job and I mean, like literally running into burning buildings. I mean, that takes a lot of courage. But then also, you're risking your livelihoods. You're risking your security. And in some instances, you're even risking your reputations because we know how the press can be by taking a stand against this. So thank you for doing so.
Thanks for having us, Dana. Good evening to you.
Yes, good evening.
Of course.
You're dead on.
Yeah. I wanted to get your reaction and whichever Stephen or Sam, however, Stephen, I can start with you and then go to Sam. I wanted to get your reaction to, I'm going to talk to you about your individual instances and what led you to this position. But with one of the headlines that we're hearing this morning now for these cities that have these mandates in effect, they're begging for volunteer firefighters to come in because you have a number of firehouses that have to be closed, like in huge cities like New York. That is incredibly dangerous. And I wanted to get your reaction to that. Stephen, I'll start with you.
Well, it's insane that we're seeing this in New York City. I mean, this could actually take over in the nation. And what's really bad about this is if we don't have firefighters filling firehouses, who is going to make those response? Who is going to be responding out to those homes, to those communities? And I don't think people understand this as when we start eliminating people's jobs that serve and protect or the brave that go in, you're not going to have these people come to your communities anymore and save your loved ones, take them to the hospital, treat them at the hospital, protect them from criminals. You talk about it in your book about having the right to have your 2A, and those people in New York don't have that. So what are you going to do if you're firing firefighters, you're firing police officers, you're firing nurses? you're not going to have the community to protect.
That's
You're not gonna have
a
that
really
protection.
good point. Yeah, very good point. And Sam, too, the way that I hear some of these politicians talk, they're like, oh, well, we can just bring in some people to replace these firefighters. I'm just, not to say anything bad about those people, but I kind of want someone trained, when I'm going through, like if we're dealing with an emergency, whether it's a fire, whether it's, whatever, a first responder issue, I kind of want someone trained. That's a job that you need to have a developed set of skills for, correct?
Absolutely, 100%. One of the things we rely on extremely in the fire service is our experience. And taking case in point here, Chief Davis, he's a well-read, a well-studied battalion chief and leader. You take him off the force, you're automatically losing the ability to properly protect not just the public, but also our own personnel. When you lose people of that credibility in the fire service, it automatically lowers the safety on the scene and makes our responders, our firefighters, our law enforcement, all much more suspect to something dangerous happening. So dead on, it's not just an impact on the public, which is absolutely our priority, but it also affects our ability to do it in a safe way and protect ourselves.
Yeah, Stephen, tell me about the situation that you found yourself in, because you ended up losing your position because of these mandates, and also they were expecting you. I was reading about the legalities of it and unlawful discipline, and there were a lot of things that were involved in your particular story. Tell people who may not be familiar, because sadly there are so many of these instances happening now, but tell us about your situation and what you stood up to, and then of course the price you had to pay for it.
So the price I paid was I was ultimately terminated. Now, sitting in that meeting before, when I was relieved of duty that evening around 10 o'clock, it never occurred to me that I was going to lose my job. I did think I would be suspended. I even said that to my supervisor. I felt that I was going to be suspended for not following a direct order. But I had mentioned in that discussion that this was an unlawful order, that what we were doing to everybody in our department was unlawful. And I tried to explain those things. I went through several things that I could prove and had evidence that was unlawful, and those are going to all be in court. We're going to show those in court, the evidence where they're unlawful. But I have, for the last 2 years, almost 2 years, been taking concerns from men and women in my battalion, and I've been in 2 different battalions, so roughly about 11, 12 stations, and I've heard the concerns, I've heard the stresses, I've heard the things that are happening in these people's lives before the mandate came down. I've heard them not sure what's going to happen with COVID, stress about, people not being able to find food, supplies, those things early on during the pandemic. And then we fast forward to 2021, and we're told in August by the mayor of Orange County that if we did not get this vaccination, you were going to be terminated. Those were his words, that you were going to be terminated. And so when I was driving around to all the stations in my battalion, I was fielding those concerns, and I was listening to over 55, 60 people telling me, men and women, saying that they were concerned about losing their job. They were concerned about getting this vaccination, that there wasn't enough evidence, data behind it, that they thought that they would be injured because those aren't being reported. And no one was listening to those things. So when I brought that forward, a couple months later said, look, you are violating their civil rights. These individuals, the mayor has given us the opportunity to take a religious exemption, a medical exemption. And those people were on the list with religious exemptions. And we were going to give them written reprimands. We were to give them oral warnings. We were making people test weekly. And these were people that had religious exemptions, and you're making them test? What if they're saying that that's against their religion? What if that's part of their religious exemption, and you're making them do that? And these are the things that I try to warn my department with. These are things that I try to say, listen, you guys are getting ready to violate. You guys have already violated for the last 2 days these civil rights, not to mention a Florida statute and some other things that we've found. But those are the things I try to relay that information. And it was just in one ear, out the other. And ultimately, I was relieved of duty, and about 2 weeks later, they terminated me.
Wow, unbelievable. And you talk about the exemptions that have been offered, and as well. And what gets me is that from what I understand, Orange County firefighters, everybody was on the same page. Like, yeah, these are unlawful orders. You can't go out and enforce something that's unlawful like this, and yet still, you had to pay the consequence for not following a mandate, especially one coming down from the federal level that is simply a press release and hasn't even gone through the proper protocol to even be recognized CFR through OSHA. I mean, it's insane. Sam, I wanted to talk this because the website Operation Freedom of Choice, there are a lot of people, Stephen was just talking about, all of the people that he works with that are in this position. They're looking at, I want to serve my community. I want to do what I set out to do, but at the same time, I want to be able to make my own risk assessment and make my own decision. Or maybe these are people who already, like I said, you all never were in lockdown. Everybody else was, but you all weren't. You guys went from being heroes to now being treated like zeros. I wanted to get your thoughts on what this means for people who they find themselves as first responders in this awful position. And a lot of them feel isolated and alone and a little scared to speak out about this because, they see what Stephen's gone through and they don't know if they were ready for that yet. So tell us about Operation Freedom of Choice and what you hope happens here.
So our organization formed about 2 months before Stephen's situation, and it really was born out of his department's area, also the Palm Beach County area. Firefighters starting to unite on the issue and the topic of the fact that this might actually be coming down the road. This is before, it blew our mind when he got terminated. But honestly, we saw writing on the wall, and at ground zero was his department. The Orange County was what we were all looking at. And I'm talking about departments all the way from Miami-Dade, all the way up to Jacksonville, Panhandle, Clearwater, east to west, north to south in the state of Florida, a red state, good gosh, with a great governor, Governor DeSantis. But there was a leader here, Jason Wheat in Orange County. And we looked to him, we wanted to connect with him, and we started to begin what we do in the fire service. Our brotherhood, our sisterhood, is to start unite on these issues and start to come up with a plan to start approaching these issues. We certainly we're facing any mandates directly in the Palm Beach County area, and we're grateful for that. But at the same time, we felt like as Orange County goes, so goes the rest of the state. If a mayor or a city council or a county commission is watching Orange County to see how they handle their personnel, how they handle it, and start to apply that same principle, we were fearful that might happen. So we were working with Orange County from the get-go, and we're now connected, like I said, all the way across the state, and hoping to move even further to a national level on this.
I hope so. Thank you both so much for what you do, for not just for first responders, but for everybody else, and for taking a stand on this. OperationFreedomOfChoice.org. The website's there in the lower third. Stephen Davis, Sam Eaton, thank you both so much. Good to see you. And we'll follow that case as well, Stephen, and we'll get updates from you as they develop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Of course. So coming up, folks, we haven't forgotten about this radical attempt to tax unrealized capital gains, financial gains. Have you heard about this? Of course you did, because we've talked about it, and it's a huge Marxist income grab. So in case you missed anything, we're going to get you up to speed on that and analyze the entire situation with economist and former Trump advisor Stephen Moore. Stay with us. If you don't own a home, you have nothing to fear from home title thieves. But if you do own a home and you don't guard it with home title lock, then you're inviting home title fraud. It's one of the fastest growing crimes. Cyber thieves around the world know that home values are sky high, and that makes homeowners, a target. The crime is scary simple. A cyber thief can simply forge your name on a property sale form and refile it. And then they're on the deed to your home, and you have no idea that you've become a victim. And then they can take out loans on your home and vanish, leaving you to prove to the police that you did not commit bank fraud. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title, and the instant that they detect tampering, they help shut it down. So if you have equity in your home, guard it. Visit HometitleLock.com. Register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim, and enter radio for 30 free days of protection. That's code radio at HometitleLock.com. Welcome back to the program. So last week we reported about the left considering a tax on unrealized capital gains. It's magic. It's insane. But it's a very, actually, and realistically, it's an action that could be extremely dangerous. So let's find out more with Stephen Moore. He is the Economic Revival Task Force Chair at FreedomWorks. You know that he also advised former President Trump, and he joins us now. Stephen, always so good to see you. You were one of the first people I thought of when I was reading the story and when it was first announced, and Janet Yellen and everybody else were defending it, going after unrealized gain. This is insanity. I mean, it really is a grab. I don't know how else to describe it, but a Marxist grab of wealth, of income. And I don't know how something like this is sustainable. I mean, do you get a check if something, do you think the government's going to give you a check if you pay out on an unrealized gain for a stock and then the price differs and you end up losing? I really don't think that you're going to get a check from the government for that. I've got to get your reaction. You're the first person, Stephen, I thought of.
Well, look, this is unworkable. And it's a really bad idea because it's a tax on people who invest and save in the American economy. So it would have extraordinarily high negative effects. And by the way, it would be a tax. It's still unclear how they would do it, by the way. Will it be a tax on wealth? Will it be a tax on unrealized capital gains one time, or do you have to pay the tax over and over again? What do you do if you've got a Picasso painting? I know you've got a Picasso in your house there, and if is the IRS going to come in and say, that Picasso, that's now worth another $1 million. You're going to have to pay us a tax on that gain. It's crazy what can happen as a consequence of this. And it is unprecedented in American history. I think we're going to defeat it. I think we're going to be able to stomp this out. Most Americans believe, the vast majority of Americans believe, that if you're going to tax something like a capital gain, it should be taxed when you realize the gain, when you get the cash, not if you hold on to the asset because you don't even know what it's worth.
No, that's a great point, because you would have to, ultimately, you would be forced into selling your things that you own, your assets, in order to even be able to pay the realization on it. And you make a really good point on that. And you actually kind of scared me a little bit, because I hadn't even thought of how many times do you have to pay this? I mean, if you have something that goes up and down in value, I mean, how many times are you going to have to actually realize this? The thing that gets me in looking at the math about this, Stephen, is that this doesn't even come anywhere close to paying for everything that they're proposing in the economic package or with reconciliation. It's not getting anywhere close to, this is the equivalent of like just shaking money out of the cushions, the couch cushions.
It really is. And they're so desperate to find revenues because so many of their tax plans have been shot down as unworkable or just terrible for the economy. And I like your metaphor of shaking, looking for quarters in the couch. They're looking anywhere they can find revenues. But here's another thing about this so-called capital gains realization or appreciation tax. What if you have a stock portfolio, let's say worth $250,000. Let's say you lose money. Let's say it goes down in $200,000, to $200,000. Do you get actually a rebate then from the IRS?
Right.
On the
$1
capital
million
loss?
question.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't just tax people if it goes up, but if you're going to do that, then you have to give them the money back if it goes down, right? I mean, that's the fair thing to do.
That actually could get really interesting now that you mentioned that. Then we could charge the government. Are they sure that they really thought this out? I mean, did they?
I don't think they thought this through.
Because I love that proposal.
Yeah, but here's where we are right now, because I've been following this debate, as you know, day by day. We're running this big coalition called Save Our Country, Kill the Bill. And they're nowhere right now. They don't have anywhere near 51 votes in the Senate, and they have nowhere near 218 votes in the House. And you saw what Joe Manchin did yesterday, where he just blew up the whole thing and said, this is crazy. I'm going to sue the guy for plagiarism. He's saying now what I said on your show, 2 weeks ago, that it's unworkable, that it's not, that we don't know what the money is. We don't know how they are using phony accounting. It's going to lead to inflation. Isn't that exactly what Joe Manchin said yesterday? I said it 2 weeks ago on this show.
You did.
And Manchin is right.
Yeah, exactly. I think he owes you a hat tip on that, Stephen, because that's exactly what you said, and it's true. I mean, now that the more that we find out about what exactly, we're dealing with another. You got to pass it to find out what's in it. the more that we're realizing this is like not even Common Core math. I'm not even quite sure where they're getting some of these estimates from. Last quick question for you, Stephen. I know you're on a time crunch today. We appreciate your time. You mentioned Joe Manchin now kind of throwing a wrench in, and I know they reduced reconciliation. Now it's like I think 1.7 trillion. That's a reduction. Like only in Washington and politics does that seem like not a lot of money. But I don't even think that has the votes. Do you?
I don't. I think that this is a good chance that we're going to be able to kill this bill entirely. The American people don't want it. That nobody signed up for. Don't forget, they already passed a $2 trillion bill earlier this year. Remember that one? That was the blue state bailout. Yep. Then they want the 1.5 trillion for this sham infrastructure bill, and then they want 3 to 4 trillion on this bill. I mean, we're spending money like it's candy in Washington right now, and I think the American people are getting fed up with this. The polls show that Americans have turned against it. So I think it's a heavy lift. I think there's at least 10 to 15 Democrats in the House that would not vote for this. I think that we know Kristen Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia in the Senate are saying they're having a hard time with this. Blow it up. We don't need it. The economy was growing at 6 to 7% when Trump left office. Now it's growing at 2%. Biden is just screwing up the economy. And the worst thing to do, if you're worried about inflation, if you're worried about the higher gas prices, the higher food prices, the higher transportation prices, the worst thing we could do right now is pass a $3 or $4 trillion debt bill that's going to be paid for by printing more money. I guarantee if that happens, I don't care what Joe Biden says. The other day he said, oh, this is going to reduce inflation. How is that going to reduce inflation? How is printing money going to reduce inflation? Have they turned economics on its head?
Yeah, that drives that. That's like one of the that's why our dollar's being undervalued because of that. Oh my goodness. Hopefully, well, I'm glad that you have been out there working so hard to try to get this defeated. And so on behalf of the American taxpayer, I thank you very much for that. Stephen Moore, always a pleasure, my friend. Godspeed.
You too. Anytime. Take care.
You. Mm-hmm. Up next, folks, another day, another member of the press trying to paint you as a domestic terrorist. Oh, wait for this ridiculous example. Coming up next, stay with us. Thanks to Biden's economic policies, job numbers have been abysmal and inflation is skyrocketing. Instead of following the former president's pro-business agenda that had the economy booming, Biden wants to tax corporations and pass trillion-dollar bills that we cannot pay for. It's time for you to be proactive and take steps to protect your wealth in retirement by investing in gold and precious metals, and Legacy Precious Metals can help you. Washington continues to print money to pay for their outrageous bills, but all that does is devalue your dollar. Gold offers you a hedge against inflation. As the dollar gets weaker, gold gets stronger. The folks at Legacy Precious Metals are the gold standard when it comes to investing in precious metals. They have a team of experts who can counsel you on the best options for you and your family. Don't leave your retirement to chance. Call Legacy Precious Metals at 866-580-2088 or visit them online to download their free investor's guide full of useful info at legacypminvestments.com. So now the Democrats have finally figured out what "Let's Go Brandon" means. They're now on the hunt to stop anybody from saying it. So first it was the Southwest pilot who reportedly said "Let's go Brandon" over a loudspeaker. Southwest is investigating this very important matter. We await the results of their very important investigation. And now this, a gun manufacturer, Palmetto State Armory, has put the saying on some of their stripped lower receivers, the AR-15 Let's Go 15 strip receiver, along with blank Joe Biden. That's where you can tell the pews. That's how that is. It's a giggle switch. So apparently liberal, like all the Marxists are just in hysterics today. And it was all because of one reporter, Ken Delinian, yeah, I'm assuming, NBC News correspondent. Guys, very important story. He wrote an entire piece about this, even reached out to the Secret Service. This journalist tweeted, quote, "I called the Secret Service about this. They had no comment." Does he know that's not a gun? It's a piece of aluminum. Okay. He must have been pretty disappointed, I guess, because the Secret Service didn't respond. They didn't sound interested. Have you noticed what a bunch of little neo-Puritan snitches the left has become? They are your Cynthias. They're your Karens, your busybody neighbors, the hall monitors of America. reporting Southwest pilots, trying to get Dave Chappelle off the air, deplatforming everybody that they don't agree with. Now they can't stand Let's Go Brandon because it got real cultural momentum. And the more they try to silence it, the more that people want to say it. And it means it's going to show up in more places. I feel like trying to work it in, Let's Go Brandon, every conversation I have and every sentence, Let's Go Brandon, I say. Now it's on a strip lower receiver for an AR-15. By the way, do you know how many firearms I have where I have stuff on my for the love? This is like common. And because the left doesn't understand anything about guns, or apparently the chant, they're frightened. Anything that disagrees with them is considered vulgarity. So the thing that the left focuses on with Let's Go Brandon is that it's code for F Joe Biden. And that's not why conservatives think it's funny. I mean, it's part of it, but it's because it encapsulates this cozy relationship between the media and them. It's just funny. I don't need to explain it, right? It's just funny as hell, right? We get it. This commitment for media to run interference for the president is now showing up on this lower receiver for an AR-15, but it's also showing up in chart-topping rap songs and coffee mugs, stickers, and T-shirts. It's actually viral. You can't invent a moment like this. Let's Go Brandon just happens. It taps into a deep-seated resentment in the public, and the Democrats are amusingly powerless to stop it. And by the way, I am not going to hear the Victorian arguments about vulgarity from the left. Vulgarity is their mother tongue, okay? As I said yesterday, this is the group that poorly crocheted pink vaginal hats to protest Trump. And again, just as a public service announcement, if your lady bits resemble your hats, please go and get some medication from your OBGYN for the love. These are folks that held up severed heads of the former president. These are people who talked about blowing up the White House, who videotaped in a music video somebody shooting the former president, right? I mean, they did slut walks. I could go on and on. But Let's Go Brandon, as a phrase, or even showing up on a lower receiver for an AR-15, that's just funny. It's Palmetto State Armory. They know their audience. And it is about it's not even anywhere close to as lethal as Antifa. So don't worry about it. And it's protected speech, by the way. And the more that the left freaks out about it, the more Let's Go Brandon will travel. Where it shows up next is anyone's guess. But NBC's Ken, which, by the way, I asked the internet, and over the span of several months, they did confirm to me that Ken is the male version of Karen. NBC's Ken Delanian will be sure to report it to the authorities when he sees it. Let's go, Brandon. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.